We're all constantly on a journey of self-discovery, trying to work out the essence of who we really are. And the peak of that feeling starts in our adolescence, where we start to finally stand on our own 2 feet and take control of our lives, whether we're making decisions for the better or for the worse, and making the mistakes that will shape who we inevitably become. One of my absolute favorite films tackles this exact journey, and that is Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird. So let's jump into the breakdown. So who is Lady Bird? Lady Bird is a teenager that goes to a Catholic school in Sacramento called Sacred Heart. She lives on the wrong side of the tracks, and her family is of low socioeconomic status. She largely rebels against the Catholic school and her mother's expectations of her as a result of feeling trapped by the confines of class constraints and suburban lifestyle. She is in a constant state of push and pull with her mother, sharing tender moments together in one moment and then grating on each other in the next. And while Lady Bird is very witty and creative, she is at the end of the day very self-centered and selfish.
You can't do anything unless you're the center of attention, can you?
And so essentially the main character here has main character syndrome. I mean, she does dye her hair red and asks people to call her Lady Bird, pretty much trying to reject everything that was given to her by her mother, and trying to be unique and to set herself apart from the people around her, who at this point she's deemed to be uncultured. So what are Lady Bird's motivations throughout the film? Well, her overarching motivation is to leave her hometown and go and study in New York.
I want to go where culture is, like New York, or at least Connecticut or New Hampshire.
She doesn't feel like she belongs in Sacramento and is just chasing that feeling of finding her people and finding herself. And because she just hasn't found that feeling yet, she just strongly believes that it cannot be found in Sacramento and has decided that she just needs to leave. Marion, her mom, snarks at her when she brings this up, scoffing that she won't be able to achieve this. And even if she did manage to get into a school in New York, the family wouldn't be able to afford it. Yeah, her mom straight up has no faith in her.
You should just go to City College. You know, with your work ethic, just go to City College and then to jail and then back to City College, and then maybe you'd learn to pull yourself up and not expect everybody to do everything.
This scene is the epitome of their relationship. Both characters are equally flawed. Both love each other deeply, but both unable to express that feeling to each other. And whenever they do have a conversation, it turns into some form of nagging, which then evolves into a full-blown screaming match. And interestingly, while Lady Bird's goal throughout the film is to make it to New York, she doesn't actually really do much throughout the film to make this a reality. Rather, the film is more an exploration of what's below the surface of this motivation. And that's that Lady Bird is looking to find herself. She doesn't know who she really is, and the act of going to school in New York is essentially what she thinks is the vehicle for her to do that. So the plot really starts to get rolling once Sister Sarah Joan talks to Lady Bird about potentially joining the school play to sort of boost up her college application.
You definitely couldn't get in.
So Lady Bird and her best friend Julie go ahead and audition for the play. And that's where Lady Bird sees Danny. She falls in love at first sight of him. And Danny becomes the forefront of Lady Bird's fixation. Lady Bird and Danny dive headfirst into young love. They share their first kiss together. They name stars together. They say I love you to each other. And they're constantly spending time together rehearsing for the play. Meanwhile, Lady Bird's dad actually gets laid off, and they can barely afford her Catholic school tuition, and her mom Marion is feeling even more pressure to provide financially. But it's clear that Lady Bird doesn't really feel the gravity of this situation, and she doesn't really view this as her problem. Danny then invites Lady Bird to Thanksgiving with his family, at his grandma's house. And this house happens to be Lady Bird's dream house. And going to the Thanksgiving and being surrounded by the loving energy and the kindness that is Danny's family, where there is no fighting, just shows Lady Bird an idealized version of what she really wants. So she starts to really feel that dating Danny will give her what she wants. It'll allow her to become more cultured, spending time with these sophisticated adults in their big fancy houses, and be a way for her to break away from her own family situation. But Lady Bird and Danny don't last that long. At the after party for the school play, Lady Bird and Julie walk in on Danny in the boys' bathroom making out with another boy. Leaving Lady Bird and Julie crying in the car, listening to Crash by Dave Matthews Band. Now with Danny sort of out of the picture, Lady Bird's fixation shifts to a new boy called Kyle. Kyle is in a band, he smokes, he reads books at coffee shops. The things he says sound sort of smart and interesting.
That's hella tight.
And to Lady Bird, Kyle sort of embodies what a cultured person looks like. So Lady Bird tries to get in with the mean and popular girls at school to try to get closer to Kyle. She vandalizes a nun's car to get Jenna's favor and lies about where she lives so they don't judge her because of her family's financial situation. Lady Bird really romanticizes the popular kids as what she thinks is truly cool, and therefore she wants to be like them. Lady Bird actually ends up making out with Kyle at a party, and they kind of start dating. You know, Kyle, he doesn't like to put labels on things, so it's pretty unclear.
That's hella tight.
Lady Bird also ends up confronting Danny, and Danny ends up breaking down in front of her because he can't bring himself to come out, and he wants Lady Bird to help him keep it a secret. And Lady Bird, although heartbroken by what happened to their relationship, ends up consoling him. Lady Bird's dad also helps her with financial aid applications so that she can potentially go to school in New York. So things are looking up for Lady Bird. But of course, when things start to look good for our protagonist, they always need to go wrong. Marion tells Lady Bird that her dad has been suffering from depression for years. Lady Bird and Julie have a screaming match outside of school. Lady Bird gets suspended from school. Jenna finds out that Lady Bird was lying about where she lived. And Lady Bird and Carl end up having sex, but it's really unspecial, and Carl finishes super quick and reveals to her that he isn't actually a virgin, although he sort of led her to believe that they were both doing it for the first time. Lady Bird is obviously furious with Kyle, but he really just doesn't care. After all of this, Marion ends up picking up Lady Bird, and without saying too much and without asking too many questions, Lady Bird cries in Marion's arms and she comforts her. Later, Lady Bird actually finds out she's been waitlisted for a New York college, but she decides to keep this a secret from her mum. Even though Kyle was a complete dick to her, she still ends up heading to prom with Kyle and Jenna. As they're on the way to the prom, they decide to just blow it off and instead go to a house party. Lady Bird initially was really excited to go to prom, but she just goes along with it. It's until she hears the song Crash on the radio and Kyle just disses it that Lady Bird finally awakens to her actions and starts to realize the cost of her being inauthentic. And she decides to finally make the choice for herself and asks to be dropped off at Julie's house. And when she gets there, Julie and Lady Bird, they make up and they go to prom together. Lady Bird's class then graduates, and at the graduation, Danny accidentally congratulates Lady Bird in front of Marion for getting on the wait list to the New York college. And instead of arguing and freaking out on Lady Bird, Marion just decides to give her the silent treatment. Lady Bird begs for a response, pleading with her and apologizing, but Marion just cannot let it go. Lady Bird eventually gets accepted to the college, and Marion and her father drive her to the airport. But Marion is still not talking to her. Lady Bird's father walks her to the gate as Marion drives off and goes to park the car, but immediately regrets it and turns around and rushes back to the departure gate. But she arrives there a bit too late to say her final goodbyes.
It's okay. She'll be back. She'll come back.
Now in New York, Lady Bird unpacks her things and she finds this stack of letters that her father had actually snuck into her bag. She calls him and finds out that the letters were actually written by Marion, but she threw them in the trash because she was too afraid to give them to Lady Bird. And it's through these letters we start to get a glimpse into the truth behind how much Marion really loves and cares for Lady Bird. Lady Bird later goes to a party and meets a new guy and introduces herself as Christine rather than Lady Bird. And she also says that she's from San Francisco rather than Sacramento. And this shows us that moving to New York didn't just magically allow her to find herself and accept herself. She's still holding some form of shame of who she is and where she grew up. She ends up getting absolutely smashed at the party and ends up in the hospital. The next morning, she stumbles into church and is overcome with emotions and needs to call her mum back home. Marion doesn't pick up, but Lady Bird leaves a voicemail thanking her for everything that she'd done for her and letting her know how much she really appreciates her and how much she loves her. And I think at this point, Lady Bird, or Christine, starts to realize that while moving to New York will allow her to experience new things and chase her ambitions, who she is has really been shaped by the people who loved and cared for her back home. Like I said at the beginning of the video, while Lady Bird's outward motivation was to get to New York, her journey throughout the film is largely an internal one. The conflict of the film is her trying to find out who she really is. Throughout the film, we see Lady Bird go from this self-centered desire to separate herself from her upbringing, to realizing her love for her best friend and her mum, and reaching this new level of self-acceptance before starting on a new chapter in life. And this is something that we all go through. There always is a level of pressure on us to be something, to be smart, to be cool, to be successful. Whether that pressure is from our parents, from our friends, from our school, from social media, or just from society in general. And truly knowing yourself despite what other people think of you, that's a really long internal journey. And realizing that we can decide who we are and what we believe without having to bend to what other people think, that truly is empowering. But it's important to know that this process is never over. We constantly change and grow, and you have to continuously relearn things about yourself and what you truly want through the various stages of your life. While Lady Bird was the protagonist of the film really is about this relationship between mother and daughter. Her mum, Marion, is the person that seems to stand in the way of all of Lady Bird's desires. And in that way, she's essentially the antagonist. And for teenagers, oftentimes, parents are the antagonists of the story. They're the ones telling us no. They're the ones telling us what we can't do. But at the end of the day, Lady Bird and Marion, mother and daughter, they just share so much love for each other. We see how Marion is constantly sacrificing and working hard so that Lady Bird can have a great childhood and live a better life than her. And it's interesting because Lady Bird even sticks up for her mum in front of other people.
Your mom is crazy. I'm scared of her.
She's not crazy. She just, she has a big heart. She's very warm.
But when they're at each other's throats, they're never talking about the things they love about each other. Parents are often the biggest critiques of their children, and that's because they want what's best for them. And it comes from a place of love. They don't want their children to make the same mistakes that they did or have to go through the same hardships. So as much as Marion loves Lady Bird, she just can't help but tear her down. I just absolutely adore this movie. Greta Gerwig is able to write dialogue that somehow feels so incredibly natural, yet is so stylistic at the same time. And to me, it just felt like a recent memory, and it really tapped into that level of nostalgia for me. Gerwig sets up the film so delicately so that you can empathize with both Lady Bird and Marion as they navigate trying to better understand themselves and each other. And the movie really holds a mirror up to the audience and allows us to reconsider our adolescence and how we treated our parents. Anyways, I hope that all makes sense. For more analysis, check out this video about whiplash and the cost of achieving artistic greatness. Thank you guys again. Bye.